Thank you for coming. I hope that you can take a seat and enjoy our speaker today from PorchLight. And we are honored to have the executive director of PorchLight, and his name is Troy Christensen, and he's a very nice guy. And I think he does a very good job running everything over there too. So it's a privilege and an honor to introduce Troy Christensen.
Thank you, Cheryl. I'm going to step over here so I'm not in front of the screen. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me this morning. It means a lot that you've set aside some time to learn a little about what we do at PorchLight. You may also have learned some from Alan or Joe Benuelos, both of whom work for PorchLight as well. I have just a few comments, and then I can open it up for questions. So as you probably know, we were called Congregations for the Homeless for 30 years and just rebranded last year as PorchLight. There's Joe. And there are a couple of reasons. One is because the name, which was accurate at the time, we were faith-based when we were formed, and now we're not, so that we can get more government grants into the organization, but also because referring to any group as the homeless, the mentally ill, the elderly, etc., is just sort of a monolith that doesn't, it brings up a certain image in people's minds that isn't reflective of the total population. So we have an annual budget of just over $6 million a year. We are now up to 50 full-time employees. We were founded in 1993 by the Eastside Interfaith Social Concerns Council. And at that time, St. Andrews was providing meals for the rotating shelter, which continues today. And then we were formally established as a nonprofit in 2012. So we were actually a church-run organization for longer than we've been an independent nonprofit. Eventually we'll catch up with that. Our mission is partnering with men in the community to create a path from homelessness to stable living. And our vision for the future is an Eastside with no homelessness.
Yes.
Then we won't need to be in business anymore.
That's right. I love hearing that.
And honestly, a lot of nonprofits sort of take on a life of their own, and they just grow, and someone is creating their own dynasty, and they forget to look back and see if they're still relevant to the community, or what they need to do to make sure they're no longer relevant to the community. And so, in addition to providing our shelter and housing services, we advocate regularly for system change that would make the difference so that we won't have to have as many services as we have. Our values are relationships, dignity and respect, community, and empowerment. And I would say relationships is probably the most important. As a professional nonprofit corporation, what our paid employees do is we provide shelter, housing, case management, mental health services, chemical dependency services, even medical healthcare services. And we do that by hiring people who perform those services. But the relationships with the community and with the men we serve is probably more important than all of those services, because those services alone often do not help people make the changes in their life that they're aiming for. I can tell you that everyone we talk to who has been successful doesn't say, they do say, PorchLight helped me get housing, or PorchLight did this, they made sure I didn't starve. But really, when you talk to them about what's important, is they say, someone, and usually a volunteer, not a paid staff, told me I mattered, told me that I was worthy of love, And that message coming from people who are not paid to give it is much more powerful. And so the relationships that we have with our volunteers and the community and the men we serve are really, really important to their success. Dignity and respect. It's really easy to have a shelter where people come in, you just say, here's your bed, rather than starting with, tell me what's going on. Let's help you. Making sure that there is a message that the us and them can change at any moment. As we know, because we have 1 in 5 employees received services in the past from PorchLight. And so those roles do change. And when our staff are humble enough to remember that, and with 50 staff, you can imagine that takes a lot of reminding. But to remind them that the tables could be turned tomorrow, and you could be the one receiving services, and the person you're providing them to could be providing them to you. Community, through our collaborations, our service opportunities and partnerships, especially the rotating shelter. I know one of the questions that will come up later is do we still need a rotating shelter now that we have the main property in Eastgate? And empowerment. We really want to walk beside the people that we're serving rather than in front of them, because it's their journey and we're just there to try and open doors for them. And these are the programs we have. Our EMS, which is Enhanced Men's Shelter, is 100 beds. And then we go up by 35, as many as 35 during severe weather. The fire department won't allow us to do that year-round, but they will when it's below freezing or other severe weather. That's the new building that's located on Eastgate. You may have seen it with the murals in front. It is low barrier, meaning that really anyone who's sleeping outside, and I should say any man who is sleeping outside, because that's the population we serve, can come into the shelter regardless of what's going on. They can be high on meth or drunk or seriously mentally ill. We don't believe that people need to be housing ready in order to get housing or in order to get shelter, because everyone deserves that all the time. Then we have the rotating shelter, which you're intimately familiar with probably, because one of the locations is here. This is how we were founded. The coding at the time didn't allow for a shelter to stay in one location for more than 30 days. So the Eastside Interfaith Social Concerns Council got together and said, why don't we just move it every 30 days to a different church? And that program still exists. It's medium barrier because we're in different neighborhoods. We don't have as high staffing, so we don't send people to the rotating shelter who are actively using drugs or alcohol. We don't send them if they're seriously mentally ill and unmedicated, because we really want to respect not only the churches, but the surrounding neighborhoods in each church. And that's up to 25 beds. And then we have a hotel shelter, which is up to 20 beds. That's currently at the Quality Inn, which you may have heard just sold. But the new owners are allowing us to stay there while they do some remodeling.
Where is that? Where is the Quality Inn?
It's in Bellevue. I don't know the address.
It's just down the hill by Little John's.
Yes.
At the McDonald's.
Yeah.
Got it, thank you.
Then we also have our day center in the Eastgate location, and that's for any man who needs a meal, a shower, to do their laundry, wants to come in and talk to a case manager or a social worker. We provide all of the same services to people who don't want to be in the shelter but just want to come for the day services, including 3 meals a day, 365 days a year. for all, and so it ends up being about 125 meals, especially at dinner. Breakfast and lunch are a little different because many of the men work. Then, one of the things that we found with our shelter services was that there wasn't a place, we like to consider ourselves a conduit out of homelessness. The shelter is not a place to land. It's a place to get things together and try and find more stable housing. And we realized that there weren't enough options for people to leave because the market rate for rent is so high on the east side. And so we have over time purchased and leased multiple houses in an apartment complex. So we have 70 beds, and that is for people with disabilities who have had long-term homelessness and are unlikely to be able to work, because being in these houses also provides them a subsidy so that they only pay a third of their income. If they have no income, they don't have to pay rent. If they make $700 a month from Social Security, they pay, whatever that would be, $233 a month, so that they still have 2/3 of their income for their other needs. And then we do outreach across East King County, not only for individual men, but for anyone living outside. It would be a little ridiculous for us to come across an encampment and only talk to the men and leave everyone else there. What you may not know, when it comes to shelter services, there are 4 organizations on the east side, and we divide up the work by population. So PorchLight provides unaccompanied men shelter. The Sophia Way, which was also founded by the Eastside Interfaith Social Concerns Council, serves individual unaccompanied women. Mary's Place provides shelter for families, and Friends of Youth provides shelter for youth and young adults. There's the front of our building with the mural on it. This went up just about the same time we rebranded as PorchLight. We had an artist from Minneapolis who was actually raised in Australia and has a thick Australian accent, but his name is Guido Van Helten, so he's half Italian and half Dutch. But he was raised in Australia and lives in Minneapolis. And he was just a great, great artist. The 2 faces on the front of the building are both men who were in the shelter that he befriended and got their permission, and they also helped him do some of the painting. The particular paintings are based on a photograph that he took with them behind glass looking out, or I should say outside glass looking in. And the goal was to show that homeless people, men experiencing homelessness, often are not seen. They often don't want to be seen as well. But sometimes even those that want to be seen, people just walk by and they're not seen. And so it was representative of that. And the one on the right in particular that's also in the upper right corner there, is to show the hope. You can see hopefulness in his face. This is the inside. If you haven't been there, the view is kind of like this. I mean, it's really, really beautiful. Not what you would expect at a homeless shelter. I don't know if any of you were ever at the old location, which was Lincoln Center, which was actually an upgrade from where we had been before, but compared to this site, it's vastly, vastly different. It was very dark. There were 80 entrances, which made it very difficult to manage.
Wow.
And in our new building, I believe there are only 4 ways in, so those are your options rather than 80. But the view is just amazing. And we have a beautiful commercial kitchen that was purchased for us by Kroger. and
Yay.
yeah, they really stepped up for us. And there's downstairs on the 3rd floor, going from right to left, our conference room, the library under the stairs, and then our Serenity room, which is used for our behavioral health groups. So I'm happy to answer any questions anyone has. Yes?
If we come across an unhoused person or a tenant, should we call you to see if they're on your radar?
Yes. Yeah, that would be great. And the person you can ask for is Skylar. He's the one who does the outreach. In fact, we just had that happen on Friday. And so he went out and located the encampment that they were at.
Can I take that a step further?
Yes.
Do you have a number that you can give us that we can give to the community to get a hold of you?
Yes.
I don't mean you specifically.
No, I don't. Do you know the main number, Alan? I don't have it memorized.
I do.
I mean, if you just Google PorchLight, that's the
Oh,
number.
yes, and it's, yeah, it's on the website.
Okay, that's what I wanted to know. Okay.
Yes.
When your building was going up, the Plymouth Housing building was going up simultaneously, and there was a lot of confusion in the community about, okay, which is, with that time it was Congregation for the Homeless, and now I guess it's clear, but is there any relationship between the two organizations, the two buildings?
Yes. So actually, when we initially found the property, and I think it was the 5th or 6th location, because everyone said they don't want a shelter near them. And finally, this Eastgate property had less pushback. And so we found 10 acres, and we didn't need that much space, so we divided it up. Plymouth Housing has a 92-unit permanent supportive housing project serving the same population we do in our housing. And then just down the hill from that, between us and Seattle Humane, is 350 units of workforce housing that are based upon, you have to have a certain income, below a certain income to qualify to live there. And I couldn't believe it when I found out how much it was. You can live there and get a rent subsidy if you're at 80% of the area median income.
Yeah.
Well, in Bellevue, the area median income is $120,000 a year. So you can make quite a lot and still qualify, because even if you're making $80,000 a year and you've got a couple of kids, it's hard to get by today on that amount of money. So that we have the workforce housing. Plymouth Housing has been doing permanent supportive housing, I think, for all of their time as a nonprofit, and that's the work of their organization. They develop housing for people with disabilities who've been homeless for long periods of time. And so we have developed a relationship with them because we share a parking lot. And we have a lot of shared maintenance agreements, and we have, guests going back and forth between our shelter and their housing. We also got about 15 of our shelter guests into their permanent housing when they opened. And so that was really exciting for us. We still probably need 300 or 400 more units of permanent supportive housing, specifically for men, that would really make the difference for us so people move in and out of our shelter faster. One of the things, I've been at PorchLight for just about a year, and one of the first things I asked for was our length of stay in the shelter. And I discovered pretty quickly that there's a bimodal distribution, meaning we have men who stay there for less than 6 months, often are working, they get back on their feet pretty quickly, and they go. And then we have a second population that has been there for years, because they have disabilities, they have almost no income, and they can't afford to rent on the open market. And so for all of them, we need permanent supportive housing.
And you mentioned the work, so I think that's something that our community will be very interested in hearing, is the bimodal situation. So how many, and I don't know if you mentioned it, how many men do you think, what percentage are actually working out of, let's say you have a full shelter, 100 beds?
Probably.
I know you can't give me a specific
Right,
number.
it's between 20 and 30%
'Cause I think
at the main
people
shelter.
would-
The rotating shelter, it's closer to 50%.
Right. I think people would be surprised to hear that.
Oh,
Okay, I think the
absolutely.
perception, and I'm just gonna tell you,
Yep.
because it's out there on Nextdoor and on all these
Yep.
other social medias, and so I think we here wanna educate everyone else who is, it's here, now let's figure out how we can work with this population and what we can do. So actually calling you and you work closely with the Bellevue Police
Very.
and they ride, I don't know if everyone knows this, that Bellevue Police has, certain officers have social workers literally riding with them with bulletproof vests so that they can attend to and bring them to the shelter to men, women, or children that are in crisis, whether it's mental or physical. So if you call 911 and you ask for a wellness or a well check, whatever you want to call it, that's in Bellevue anyway, who will respond.
Yeah, it's called
Yeah.
CCAT.
Yeah.
I can't remember exactly what it stands for, but
Yes. Do they have sleeping rooms or dorm rooms? or-
it's a dorm room. You can see there, those were the bunks before we had the mattresses on them. There are also curtains that section off, break it into about 4 sections. Just a point of, or a story related to men working, but also in the shelter. We had a man who was working full-time, making reasonable amount of money, and still couldn't move out. And we began, the case manager was having conversations with him and learned that he is staying in the shelter because the majority of his income goes for his children. He has child support payments, and he is very diligent about making sure that he makes those. And so that makes it really difficult for him to also find a place that he can afford. But to hear, I think people think of homeless men and they see an old, beleaguered alcoholic on the street, half asleep. And while that may be true as well, that is definitely not the majority. There are many, many, many men who show up and are in the shelter because of their desire to make the world a better place and making sure that they are fulfilling their obligations, and they just need a shelter until they can figure out how to get also a place to stay. Yes?
Do you have a clothing bank for the men or anything else tangible that would help them get job ready?
It just so happens we do. Do you want to speak to that, Cheryl? She's one of our main volunteers.
Yeah, actually, we're in transition right now. We're trying to find a way to get more donations because they have limited space there to store the donations. And then we do have a room where we can put the donations and give them out to the men. We call it the men's shop every Friday from 10 to 12. But we're just needing more donations right now. And it's like a funnel. It's just hard to funnel them in. And we're working on that right now.
What are the most needed things?
Yeah, but there's a basket in the narthex, and I take stuff over there, and that would be the best way for all of you to contribute men's clothes, especially sweatshirts, sweatpants, jeans, new underwear.
Socks.
Socks we
No,
actually
we have
have.
thousands of
Good.
boxes.
That's usually the first thing they ask.
Yes.
Slot work.
Yeah.
Everyone
Yeah.
wants soft
That's
dries.
good to hear, yeah.
It's like,
That's great.
Shoes,
Size 32
coats,
pants.
hats, coats.
Yeah, in fact, a friend of mine is storing cartons of socks in her barn.
Oh.
It's a quiet, we just have so many, yeah. It's Bombas, the Bombas, they say if you buy one pair of socks, they
Yeah.
give you another pair. Well, we're getting them. Yeah. A lot of Bombas.
We also have a couple of star volunteers that, in addition to keeping the men's shop running with Cheryl, they also are constantly setting up men in their own apartments by providing all of the furniture and the the things you need to be able to move into an apartment, whether it be a bed or linens or cookware. Alan?
I've had 2 clients move in and get the essentials for being able to survive, cook, mattresses, cookware, and it's the expression on these folks' faces when they see something like this big gift.
Yep.
It really hits them that somebody cares. They're not going to just move in and struggle to start. And it's Miss K is that can't say enough good things about her and Cheryl.
Sir?
Was this Will or Salvation Army?
In the 3rd floor, up by where the bunks are.
Fill out your needs, or are they just independent and they don't help?
Salvation Army has their own housing, so any excess clothing and household goods they use. And the Goodwill, selling what is donated to them is part of how they get their revenue. But we do have, Kay and James, the 2 superstars, they go to, they will go to a yard sale and negotiate and say, this is for a shelter, and get a lot of stuff for free or for very little money. And then they store it until the next person's ready to move in. Yes?
Just something for all of us who are seniors. The first Tuesdays of the month, Fred Meyer, QFC, Walgreens all have like 10% off days and 20% off on certain things. So as you're thinking about filling these boxes out here, circle that date on the calendar because your money goes at least 10% further on those days.
Thank you.
Good to know.
Sir?
Of your total budget of $6 million, what portion of that is provided by donations versus government funding?
Government funding is about 75%. And then personal donations, foundations, and corporate giving make up the other 25%.
That's the main change.
Alan?
When's our lunch hour?
September.
Yeah.
It's the first thing that pops up on our website. If you just put in PorchLight, you'll see
So
it.
is that a donor's lunch or a community
Yeah,
luncheon?
it's a community luncheon that's also a fundraiser held at Bellevue College each year.
Great.
We could create a couple of St. Andrew's tables.
Absolutely.
I'll start putting up a sign-up sheet for you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So is PorchLight, it's a 503.
501c3.
501, whatever that is, nonprofit. And again, the name change from Congregations for the Homeless had to do with it needed to be not religious affiliated.
And we didn't want to say the homeless anymore.
Okay, well,
Rebranding.
It's also, when
And 30,
that switch also makes it easier to get matching donations from companies like Boeing.
Right.
You will make donations, you can match employees' or donations to a point.
Yeah.
But
3
they
to
won't
1.
do it to religious organizations.
they can't because they can't single out individual religious affiliates.
Right, that's right, yeah, so it's, if you're making people pray, they won't do it, but other than that, it's very flexible to get it from us.
Especially in here, you can say.
Yeah, so
So-
it's so it makes a difference.
and we have heard from multiple congregations saying, is there still a need for the rotating shelter now that you have the 100-bed men's shelter at Eastgate? And the answer is, even when we were at Lincoln Center, and even before that, we had the rotating shelter and a 100-bed men's shelter. So if we stopped the rotating shelter just because we moved to a new building, we would lose the capacity of 25 men a night. Alan?
And the rotating shelter is geared towards helping gentlemen learn how to live in a group setting and learn how to adult so that they can have the skills, the needs for being able to live on their own. And it's less busy and it is more concentrated on gearing people to get work. And So smaller amount of people, that's easier to handle. When we're here, it's maybe 20 guys. And so it one staff, and guys get a nice peaceful rest for the night, and they help by cleaning. It's just a different way of doing a shelter, and just a lot of interface with volunteers. Demonstratively, I'm one of the examples of being a client and moving into working for the organization, and I'll just say that it has a lasting impression. The grace.
Well done.
And Alan is now the case manager for the rotating shelter.
Alan for the win.
Another big advantage of the rotating shelter is that it gives them an environment to be clean and sober.
Yes.
And they can encourage each other, and they have drug testing.
Because it can be difficult if you're trying to get clean and sober and you're staying in the big shelter with lots of other people who are actively using. And I should say, the guests are not allowed to behave illegally on our property. But we don't kick them out if they're drinking or using drugs. We just say, you can't do it on our property. And we don't require that they be in treatment, but we offer that to them regularly if they are using. And it takes time sometimes before people are ready. Here, there, and then back to you.
Are there any responsibilities at all for the men?
Yes, we have a code of conduct that we go over many times in the evening when we're starting to fill the beds for the shelter that night. We're not allowed to require them to work for us, but there are a list of behaviors that they are required to live within, and if they don't, they can be asked to leave. We try to avoid that whenever possible because we don't want to create homelessness. But yeah, we do have a list of responsibilities for them. Now that said, a lot of the guests also volunteer and do a lot of cleaning and different kinds of work within the shelter, but we don't require that.
I've got a two-parter. One, and I'm assuming I know the answer to this, but are your shelters generally speaking at or near capacity, like close enough to consider them?
Almost always.
Yeah. So
less in the summer, more in the winter.
Yeah, follows, yeah. Second question, I know when you were putting in this location at Eastgate, you said you got less pushback here. We still live around here, so we saw a lot of that. My question is, with a low barrier shelter, a lot of people see low barrier and they go, oh, well, everybody going there is going to be drinking, using drugs, mentally unstable, whatever. What do you find? Is it actually, does that perception match the reality, or do you see a lower rate than what people would generally assume in the community? People actually going, because you said low barrier means you can come in even if these conditions are met, but the flip side of that is it's not a requirement that you have to be using and drinking, obviously, in order to make it into the shelter. It just means you're not excluding people on that basis.
I would say it's less than the general public believes. They believe, I think they see a population and they want to, it's easier for us to categorize people into single groups. And I think that's what happens. And then what gets attached to that monolith is alcohol, drugs, mental illness, violence. And I would say it's way crime. It is less than that for sure. Now, that said, we get complaints with some regularity in the surrounding businesses where because we've told them they can't drink on our campus, so they head out into a wooded area by CBRE or by the Seattle Humane and drink there, and that becomes a problem when we get complaints about it. So yeah, it does still happen for sure. And we have probably, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 opiate overdoses a month where we have to revive the men with Narcan and sometimes even with chest compressions. And the amount of Narcan we have to give now, is everyone sort of familiar with Narcan? Back when it was just heroin, a single dose always was enough to revive someone. But with fentanyl being completely unregulated and created on the streets, sometimes a single pill is enough that it will kill anyone. And so that ends up a lot more frequent than we would like. Fortunately, on site, we've been able to revive everyone so far. But we did have someone who had been banned because they weren't following the code of conduct and was on a neighboring property and overdosed, and there was no one there to revive him. I think here, and then you.
Well, it was just dovetailing into what he was saying, actually.
Okay.
And this may be a bigger conversation and something to consider, and we can talk after. Living in the community. Yeah, here we go. You know, we're here because we care, and we want to make sure that what you're doing gets out there, educating the collective, if you will. And there are people, our neighbors and our community who are really not happy with this and are very vocal and pushing back. And we're very realistic. It's here. Now let's build bridges with you and these people so we can help them. But we need you to help us, help them understand the positive and the good here. So if we can maybe have a parking lot conversation about this, how we can get this information out to the community, not throwing you to the wolves. Didn't invite anybody here.
We get hostile audiences regularly.
And because I'm going to tell you, the perception out there is that the minute PorchLight came in, and this is of course not what we believe, that crime has increased, violence has increased. We all know the reality is that was here long before. But I'm telling you, the perception is, and that these gentlemen are the reason, and they're coming from PorchLight. And so what, if you know, even if you want to step away and think about it, what can we do as a community to, you know, there's always going to be the outliers. Yes, there's going to be somebody who's not playing by the rules, right? But your PorchLight is shining bright right now in several ways. So I don't know if you want to address that here or how you can help us.
Well, I think if you hear of a community group that is, then we can absolutely come and speak to them. And
no, it's on. It's not. It's on next door. It's on.
Yeah.
It's on a much. Yeah. Hello. Yeah. It's on a much broader scope. There's a Facebook page that talks about Factoria in specifically. Yeah. Looks like expletive. And they're blaming, and they're blaming
PorchLight and Plymouth.
So, you know, we want to work as a community that our community understands that, you know, this gentleman over here, here's how it can work and why this is here.
I think the most important message is they are us.
It's not getting through.
You know, every one of them is someone's son, or someone's brother, or someone's husband, or someone's father. And it's easy to forget that and to just think simply and say they're all alike, they're all bad, because that's the easy thing to do. And so it's important to remind people, no, they're not all alike, we're not all alike. Can you imagine if they said everyone who is housed is the same? I mean, that just would be ridiculous. So everyone experiencing homelessness is not the same either.
I suspect, honestly, part of that also comes from when that new building went in, you know, it's a substantial construction project.
Yes.
So they hear low barrier shelter, you know, that's the message that was getting out. Low barrier shelter going in Eastgate, and they looked at this and went, oh wow, that's huge. Not realizing that's actually 3, like, kind of being built projects, right? You have PorchLight, you have the
Plymouth,
and then the
Polaris.
Yeah.
We all begin with P, which is very confusing.
Yeah, exactly. But it's like, I think there was this idea of, they saw especially the workforce housing down there on that lower lot, and went, oh wow, that is a huge low-barrier shelter. When in reality, you know, you think about it, and when you say you have 100 beds total, max capacity per night is not honestly that much in the grand scheme of things, especially when you look at the need in the area.
Right.
You know, that's, if you say, you know, well, we're at capacity every night, that's because there's being unmet capacity elsewhere.
Yeah,
So.
yeah. We
Here
get
and
it.
then here, or here, there, and then here.
Thank you. I have a suggestion and a question. My
Okay.
suggestion is that I think a lot of people receive the City of Bellevue paper newsletter occasionally.
Yeah.
My suggestion would be to put a column in there and put in some statistics and general information. I think that's a free, easy way, and it's a start. My question is, another perception was that this beautiful new shelter was better than anything in Seattle, and it all come across the bridge to Bellevue. Do you have any sense of where the men are coming from?
They are 90% from here on the east side.
Yeah, that's another good statistic.
And of course, Seattle would say, everyone from all over King County goes to them.
Probably true.
Yeah.
Well, it's less true now than it was.
Yeah.
Um,
Certainly a lot in South King, that's for sure.
And then,
Can you describe what a gentleman experiences when they first walk in the door?
yes, well, I can explain what they should experience, and it probably happens most of the time. But sometimes they also come in and they're not ready for this, but they're greeted at the front door. Someone sits down with them and begins an intake process, and that is whether they go into the shelter or not, even if they're just there to use the day center. And that tells us a little more about what their needs are, what their individual goals are, and what resources they have. And they're usually offered something to eat immediately. They're shown the general area where they can wash their clothes, take a shower, sit and read, watch TV, and then if they end up staying in the shelter, then they also are there in the evening and get the code of conduct reminded for them.
Just because I think it's important, is we do offer case management for the main shelter, the AMS. So we also have employment case management for those that are trying to get ready for work, get their resumes. I've been seeing how intakes are done. We let those folks that are coming in, you don't even have to stay there to access services sometimes, but we do like the general idea. The general idea is to get everyone a bed and then get them a case manager, get them on a track where there's a plan, where they might be able to explore housing down the road. We do celebrate a lot of people getting moved in. Once they start working with the case manager. I wish we could do more. The biggest hurdle is getting people hooked up with a job that not only allows them to pay rent, but save money, and they don't have to come back to the shelter.
Right.
But the rent is so high, and wages, connecting with jobs that are at that level, it's getting harder and harder. But education, we want to get you into housing before we can hook you up or get you into college or wherever. But
So you just said something very interesting that I think people might find helpful, is that, let me just clarify, I want to make sure I understood you.
Sure.
That if you come into the day center and say you're just not ready to be sleeping there because you're just not comfy yet, but you're coming from the day center, you can get case management, you can speak to someone. It's nice and right.
Yeah.
I think people don't realize that.
But if you want ongoing services, you do want to stay there. So
Yeah.
you have a question?
Sure.
Yes. Alice started on a little bit of employment. Do you have a job bank? Do you have casual labor?
pool that you can call up and say, I need yard work done, or?
We don't currently, but we have relationships with employers where we make referrals to them with the men who are qualified for that work. And that's what our employment specialist does.
Under the table, employment is, it's helpful to get cash in people's pockets, but it's problematic in that, you know.
Can't prove your income for rent.
Yeah, we want steady income for folks, and we don't want the guys to be exploited, so.
Yes.
Medical care?
We have an RN on staff, and we have a relationship with Overlake Hospital and Overlake Medical Clinic, as well as the local King County health system, public health. And we are in the process of hiring a nurse practitioner that would be able to prescribe as well.
Wow.
Cheryl.
Yeah, so I would like to share that I know there is a community outreach kind of coordinator, and he reaches out to all of the buildings and offices and things like Seattle Humane, and they meet, I think, once a month, so they have a representative from the community, and it's as part of this, the city council set this up, Luca or something like that.
Nico.
Yeah, so that people from the community too, there's some homeowners that are part of that represent the other homeowners that are in the area. So it's possible that Troy could get that group to reach out to some of these people on next door and let them attend some kind of a meeting.
Yeah, I think there's a lady that's a community liaison or something that's on the, oh man, what's her name? But she's working on the Eastgate thing, so someone like that.
To-do list.
Yeah, yeah, she actually reached out to me and said, hey, because there's that people just don't understand, like you said, what those three buildings are for, how it's literally, you have day center, you come off the street, you go boom, 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 and putting it out there, just facts on next door, and people are like, what? And it's like, these are facts, this is reality. Let's, you know, so thank you, Cheryl.
And Cheryl, could you tell us what you need for the month of May, of June? What can we do to help?
For the rotating shelter?
Yeah.
Yeah, so we're doing pretty good. This lady here, Jay, is signing up people as hosts, and she has most of the calendar filled up for June. That they
Saturdays and Sundays, I have a lot of things.
Okay, and they basically will welcome the men when they come at 6 o'clock, make sure they can find everything in the kitchen that they need, because we'll probably have outside groups bringing in dinners, as we're working on that. And so that's what the host does, is just welcome everybody from 6 o'clock, leave at 7, because the men are going to be getting ready for bed and putting their mats down, and they really don't want to visit after 7 o'clock, so 6 to 7. And we have people signing up to be shoppers twice a week to pick up fresh milk and bread and things like that at the store. And Nancy Davis is coordinating that. And we have people that can write welcome cards. Jay's coordinating that too. So let me know if any of those things interest you. So far, we're not signing up for dinners yet, but we're gonna work on getting some other people to help us with that. Carla?
So how does that work? I'm a homeless man. I work. I've got my kids and my money, whatever. I just need a quiet place to just chill out for the day. So I go to the day center, and then I'm like, I'm not ready to sleep here, so I can just leave. I need to leave at 6 or
11.
11.
Oh, we're open until 11 p.m.
So the day center is open till 11, but then there's that. Then you can come in at 6.
Oh, to come to our church.
For the shelter.
So the way it works, the day center is open from 5 a.m. till 11 p.m.
Okay.
And in order to get into the rotating shelter, you have to have received an intake, and the staff have to have determined that you are eligible to be in a medium barrier shelter. Because what we don't, if they decide on their own, we would end up with a population in the rotating shelter that would be more difficult to monitor. And so they have to be screened and approved by PorchLight.
Okay, but then, okay, I guess, actually
But
what I was
yes, when they
asking.
leave here in the morning, they
No,
can't
not
go to
here,
the...
I'm staying at the shelter. So
Oh, okay.
there's a day center at the shelter. It's open from when to when?
5 a.m. to 11 p.m.
Okay, and then you can come in and spend the night you can come in at 5 a.m., be there during the day. If you want to stay the night, you can stay the night. If you want to leave, you have to leave by 11?
Yes.
Okay, and then if you just want to come in to spend the night, you come in at 6? Or whatever, I guess.
You start checking people in around 8 o'clock, and then by 9 o'clock, usually they know what beds are available for new folks.
Yep.
So if you're brand new, it's a little tougher during the colder year,
Yeah.
time of the year to get a bed.
Okay,
And it could take a couple weeks, up to a couple weeks during the colder part. But when the weather's nice, there's a lot of beds available. So folks come in and they'll do their intake and during the day and then start getting checked in around 8.
okay.
Yes.
How
Last
do the men
question,
get
and then I
to
want
the
to turn it
shelter?
over to Joe for a minute.
How do the men get to the shelter? Public transportation, bicycles,
Yeah.
they have their own vehicles?
All of the above.
Yeah.
Many of them, we have about 30 spots for shelter guests for parking, and so a lot of them do drive. We're also close to a park and ride, so when our parking lot is full, some men park their cars there and come down to the shelter. Some do have bicycles, a lot take public transportation. We provide free bus tickets for them.
So a good percentage have vehicles, cars?
I'd say probably 20%. Joe, working in the rotating shelter and working as a behavioral health specialist, anything you want to add about PorchLight?
It's heartbreaking just to hear the conversation. It's overwhelming. I'm glad that everybody's here participating to learn more,
Yep,
because that is the key.
yep.
I'm happy to be here. I'm happy to be alive.
We're happy to have Joe here.
That's right.
Thank you. I gotta be honest, it is overwhelming. It is a catastrophe for everybody. That's the reality. And we never know.
That's right.
That is heart-wrenching, especially when you see that happen to your loved ones. And those that are less fortunate, or however you label it, it is devastating. So I'm just grateful for everybody here.
Thank you, Joe.
Thank you. We're grateful for you too.
And I apologize, I'd love to stay after and talk, but I have another speaking engagement at the LGBT Center in Tacoma at 11.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Gotta get to people right now.